A nuclear plant control room gets the first alarm of a coolant leak. The lead engineer, a 30-year veteran, insists the system is reporting a false positive. For 47 critical minutes, he argues with his instruments while temperatures rise. This isn't a story about equipment failure, it's about why expertise becomes a liability when seconds count. Chapter 1: The Paradox of Competence. When a crisis hits, we instinctively look to the experts. The surgeon during a medical emergency, the engineer when the bridge shows stress, the CEO when markets crash. But there's a hidden pattern in those first moments. The most knowledgeable people often hesitate the longest. This seems backwards. Shouldn't more knowledge mean faster action? Let's examine the mechanism. Expertise isn't just stored facts, it's a sophisticated pattern-matching system. An expert looks at a situation and runs it through thousands of previous cases in their mental database. This looks like X, which we solved with Y. This system works brilliantly in normal operations. It's efficient, accurate, and prevents reinventing the wheel. But crisis situations have a defining characteristic: they don't match previous patterns cleanly. The signals are ambiguous, contradictory, or incomplete. The expert's pattern-matching engine starts throwing errors. This doesn't compute. The data conflicts with established models. Their entire career has trained them to distrust quick judgments when the data is messy. Meanwhile, someone with less expertise but with a different mental framework might see the same situation differently. They're not trying to match it to a historical database. They're asking simpler questions. What's the worst thing that could happen right now? Or, what's the one action that would make things less bad? This creates the first critical tension in crisis response. The people most qualified to understand the problem are often the least prepared to act on incomplete information. But this is only half the story. The real shocker comes next: how organizational structures amplify this hesitation. Chapter 2: How Systems Protect the Wrong Things. Let's move from individual psychology to organizational design. When an expert hesitates in a crisis, the system around them doesn't just watch it, actively rewards their caution. Consider the incentive structure. In most organizations, what gets punished? Reckless action. What gets forgiven? Cautious delay. A manager who acts quickly and is wrong faces immediate consequences. A manager who waits for more data and is wrong can always say, "The information wasn't clear." This creates what we might call an accountability asymmetry. The costs of acting prematurely are immediate and personal. The costs of delaying action are diffuse and systemic. They show up later, in the crisis escalating, in the containment window closing. But by then, it's harder to trace back to that initial hesitation. Now layer on another factor: social proof. When the senior expert hesitates, it signals to everyone else that hesitation is the appropriate response. Junior staff see their leader, the person who knows the most, not taking action. Their natural conclusion is, if they're not worried, I shouldn't be either. This creates a cascade of inaction that looks like consensus. But here's where it gets truly dangerous: the insulation effect. The higher someone rises in an organization, the more layers exist between them and operational reality. The expert isn't seeing raw data, they're seeing filtered reports. They're not feeling the heat from the machinery, they're reading temperature graphs. This insulation creates what military strategists call the fog of peace, a false sense of normalcy that persists at headquarters while chaos unfolds on the ground. So we have individual pattern matching failing, organizational incentives rewarding caution, and structural insulation preventing reality from breaking through. This creates what I call the hesitation loop, a self-reinforcing cycle where every element of the system conspires to delay action. But wait, if this is true, how do any organizations respond effectively to crises? The answer lies in what happens before the crisis even begins. Chapter 3: The Pre-Crisis Architecture. Successful crisis response doesn't start when the alarm sounds. It starts years earlier, in how an organization builds what I'll call its pre-crisis architecture. This isn't about binders on shelves or emergency contact lists. It's about designing systems that bypass the hesitation loop entirely. Let's examine the most effective models, from aircraft carriers to surgical teams to wildfire response units. They all share three architectural features that most corporations lack. First, decision authority is pushed to the edge. The person closest to the problem has permission to act. On an aircraft carrier, a junior sailor can order a multi-million-dollar aircraft destroyed if it becomes a deck hazard. They don't need to call their manager. This isn't anarchy, it's bounded autonomy. Clear rules define when and how to act, but within those bounds, hesitation isn't an option. Second, they practice failure. not success. Most corporate crisis drills are backward. They practice responding to predefined scenarios with known solutions. Real crises don't work that way. Effective organizations practice responding to ambiguous, evolving situations where the right answer isn't clear. They're not training for specific crises. They're training for the experience of uncertainty itself. Third, and this is the subtle one, they separate declaration authority from response authority. In many failing responses, no one can officially declare a crisis until it's obvious to everyone. By then, it's too late. Effective systems allow anyone at certain levels to trigger crisis protocols based on specific criteria. The declaration isn't a judgment call, it's a mechanical response to certain conditions being met. Think of it like a building's sprinkler system. The sprinklers don't wait for the fire chief to declare a fire. They activate when a specific temperature threshold is reached. The system is designed to bypass human hesitation. Now, if these architectures work so well in high-stakes environments, why aren't they common in business? The answer reveals our final and most uncomfortable layer. Chapter 4: The Cultural Immune Response. When organizations try to build crisis architectures, they often encounter what I call the cultural immune response. The organization's normal operating culture rejects the very systems that would make it crisis resilient. Let's trace the mechanism. Normal corporate culture values deliberation, consensus, and risk mitigation. Crisis architecture values speed, autonomy, and risk acceptance. These are fundamentally incompatible operating systems. When you try to install crisis protocols, the immune response activates. Middle managers resist giving up control. Legal departments worry about liability. Finance departments question the cost of preparedness. The organization systematically dismantles the very architecture it needs, all while believing it's improving or optimizing the system. This creates the ultimate irony. The traits that make an organization successful in peacetime, careful analysis, consensus building, risk aversion, are the exact traits that guarantee failure in crisis. But there's a deeper layer here. Crisis response forces uncomfortable truths to the surface. It reveals where power really lies, whose judgment is trusted, and what the organization truly values over its stated values. Many organizations would rather risk catastrophic failure than face these truths in daylight. This explains why so many post-crisis investigations find that warning signs were ignored or protocols weren't followed. It wasn't negligence, it was the system working exactly as designed to preserve peacetime operations at all costs, even when those costs include being unprepared for war. So where does this leave us? If expertise fails first, systems reward hesitation and culture rejects preparedness. What actually works? Chapter 5: What you can do before the sirens sound. You don't need to overhaul your entire organization to change its crisis trajectory. You need to create what special forces call bypass channels, small, focused interventions that route around the hesitation loop. Start with this: identify your crisis sensors. These are the people in your organization who consistently see problems early. They're often dismissed as alarmists or pessimists. Listen to them. Create a direct, protected channel for their concerns to reach decision-makers without being filtered through layers of management. Next, practice ambiguity. Once a quarter, gather your team and present them with an incomplete, contradictory crisis scenario. Don't give them a solution. Measure only one thing: how quickly they take their first concrete action. The goal isn't to get the right answer, it's to build the muscle of acting without certainty. Third, redesign one critical permission. Identify a single decision that currently requires approval from someone insulated from the reality. Change the rule. Let the person closest to the problem make that call with clear boundaries. Watch what happens. Does the system collapse, or does it adapt? Finally, and most importantly, separate identity from judgment. In a crisis, the question shifts from what should we do to what would competent people in our situation do. This subtle reframe bypasses ego and self-preservation. It's not about you being right. It's about the organization surviving. The uncomfortable truth about crisis is that it doesn't create character, it reveals architecture. The hesitation, the confusion, the failed responses, they're not moral failures, they're system outputs. Your organization will respond exactly as it's designed to respond, which leaves us with one forward pull question. If the alarms sounded right now, what would your design reveal about you?